an exciting thing to be standing in front of Disneyland.
So many adventures wait within.
And there's such an air of mystery because when you're standing outside the park, it's all concealed by all these huge bushes and trees.
Look, even right up next to the gate, you can barely see the train going by.
It's just a little tease, but it wasn't always this way. Back in the 1950s, there was barely a shrubbery to be seen. You had a pretty clear view of that train from the outside.
And back then, when people knew a lot less about what was inside of Disneyland,
I imagine it must have been very exciting back then, pulling into the still mostly dirt parking lot over here and looking just a few yards away at Walt Disney's original Magic Kingdom. And not only seeing the tops of all the Main Street buildings, but seeing that train chugging around the park from quite a distance away.
nowadays the train is a lot harder to spot from the outside.
But of course we do have the monorail still rooting around out here to take a gander at.
And I don't hate it.
It was actually only very recently I found out only the first few rows of the Disneyland parking lot were paved in the 50s.
Almost everything else where DCA is now was still a dirt lot.
It was all still considered overflow parking, so that tells you what a difference in the size of the crowds back then, huh?
Oh, I love doing a little Disneyland time travel.
But then again, every visit to Disneyland kind of feels like Disneyland time travel because for the most part, this place has remained so classic and so timeless.
This is one of those rare places where the present feels like you've walked into the past.
And the past is still very much alive in the present.
And there's no finer example of that
Then right here in Town Square, and of course, Main Street, USA. It's beautiful.
I mean, talk about time travel. Look at that.
It's like we've stepped through the pages of a storybook and straight into the world of yesteryear, just the way Walt Disney intended.
And it doesn't just feel like we've walked into the turn of the 19th to 20th century.
The cool thing is that now that Disneyland is well over 60 years old,
The time traveling works on two levels.
not only are we walking through a living version of American history,
But it feels like we're walking into Disneyland history as well.
just think about it. It's been longer between Disneyland's opening and now
Than it has been between the turn of the century and the opening of
But
Disneyland.
maybe it's because of both of those levels that I've always loved delving into Main Street history.
Like I love coming by the Carnation Cafe's outdoor seating
And
area.
remembering that once upon a time, this was the Disneyland Flower Market where you could purchase beautiful floral arrangements
Artificial, of course.
for all of the loved ones in your life. Or for how a brief moment in time, this was the intimate apparel shop.
Where you can actually purchase underwear. Oh, that's right, drawers.
Knickers, pantaloons.
And of course, brassieres.
As a matter of fact, inside, courtesy of the Hollywood Maxwell Brassiere Company, they even had their mascot, the Wizard of Bras, teach you the history of underwear.
No knickers in here anymore, though.
And sadly, no more Wizard of Bras. Still a great piece of history, though.
And in addition to history, I also love exploring Main Street mysteries.
Like when we looked back into the history of the infamous test wall here at Disneyland.
built originally to test brick patterns for Main Street, USA.
My original video started a flurry of research that resulted in us finding out
That not only does it indeed date from the opening of the park,
but based on this very rare construction photo, may have even been part of an early building on the west side of Main Street. And then, after spending decades hiding out who knows where, it was recycled again into this permanent drinking fountain next to the Main Street lockers. There's still a little bit of mystery surrounding this wall, but one thing we know for sure, it's been here since the beginning.
1955.
Well, friends, it's actually for a different mystery that I've come to Disneyland today, but because we got here so early.
And we've got some extra time before we get to that.
I should mention that this isn't the original location of Disneyland's Main Street lockers. And as a matter of fact, this whole dead end here wasn't built until the 1990s.
Before that time,
The lockers were actually located much closer to the front in an area next to the firehouse that is now a part of the Emporium.
of course, originally it looked nothing like this.
These little side buildings here are also later additions.
Let's do a little time traveling to the mid-1950s.
And you can see the original buildings in this corner of Town Square looked a lot different.
Now this is 1956-57 we're talking about, very early.
And you can see in the old footage that this skinny white building next to the Emporium was still there back then.
And the original locker building was located right here.
where this white facade is now.
And look carefully at that footage in front of the locker building.
You'll see an old horse-drawn wagon with the word Beacons on the side really big. B-E-K-I-N-S.
Well, Beacons or Beacons? I think Beacons.
Was a moving and trucking company that were the original sponsors of the locker area.
This is some very early, very obscure, almost secret-ish history.
Later, their sponsorship would actually be replaced with another moving company's sponsorship.
Global Van Lines, and instead of that wagon, they had an old school truck parked out here.
Which lasted a lot longer, and so there are many old school photographs.
And even some old school merchandise of that Global Van Lines truck.
Which still exists and is now in the hands of a private collector. Anyway, I love peeking into the old Beacons past, huh?
Now, unless I'm greatly mistaken, and unless I've mixed up my facts in here somehow, which does happen from time to time.
Even later, the lockers were sponsored by National Car Rental before finally closing in 1990.
And of course, after that,
they created a brand new dead end for Center Street over here.
Which included the 1955 brick test wall, the new and improved Main Street lockers, and
a brand new ice cream shop.
Which I believe at least at one time was known as Nestle's Main Street Ice Cream Cone Shop. Something like that.
Of course, it was only referred to that way on the maps. The sign said Dryers, but Dryers is owned by Nestle. Before that, it was sponsored by Carnation, I believe, which is the way that I mostly remember it. Oh, you know that kid's gonna be stoked to get some ice cream. Look at that. Still here today. No longer serving ice cream out of these windows, but they've still got ice cream on the windows. Oh man, and it's so hot out here today. I just want one little lick. No. Must resist. I'm on a diet. Oh yeah, Center Street was getting brand new for the 90s, all right. And look at this back here.
There were also a couple of lovely themed areas
just for payphones.
Wow, ancient history.
It's amazing that we kept all this Victorian stuff out here, but the payphones, they've gone with the wind. See, now they did such a fantastic job of constructing new buildings that so seamlessly blend into Center Street
that most people never suspect these buildings weren't here from the beginning.
Oh no, back in the day, instead of looking like this, the dead end of Center Street looked a lot more like this. Whoa, look at that. That is totally weird, huh? It's looking very, very different today and probably has a lot more traffic considering there's lockers back there now.
Instead of having the lockers back up there in Town Square.
Next to the old fire station. And speaking of the old fire station, take a look back at that Center Street footage, huh? Notice the vehicle passing in the foreground?
If you weren't paying close attention, you'd be tempted to just think it was the fire truck.
Which of course is still proudly running out here at Disneyland to this very day. But in fact,
if you look again, you'll notice it's not the fire truck at all.
It's a forgotten and long-lost Disneyland attraction, the horse-drawn fire engine.
Well, I guess technically I shouldn't say it's long-lost because it's still here.
Every year, untold thousands of guests visiting Disneyland enter into the bottom of the firehouse. They take a look at the bric-a-brac and the memorabilia.
And of course, almost every kid that passes through that doorway has to climb up on this.
The old school horse-drawn fire engine. The very same one we saw in that clip of the old dead end of Center Street.
For many decades now, it's simply been a prop here in the firehouse,
which generations of children, including myself, have climbed all over. But if you've ever wondered why it has those bench seats in the back,
well, now you know. It's because originally
that fire engine was a Disneyland ride. Guests in the 1950s purchased an A ticket to ride on the Disneyland Fire Wagon. It was a 10-cent ride back then.
Even with inflation, that's only $1, so hey, that's a heck of a bargain.
And it was actually the sole Disneyland Fire Department ride until 1958.
And my friend Bob Gurr built that motorized fire engine,
which, as he loves to tell us, he actually drove from the studios in Burbank to Disneyland on the freeway.
Well, that motorized fire truck was so popular,
I guess eventually Disneyland felt that they didn't need the old horse-drawn fire wagon anymore.
And so it's rested quietly in here for years and years.
One of the few old school Disneyland attractions that stayed in the park
that you can't ride, but you can still still take a fun pic with.
Now, the Main Street Fire Department's horse-drawn fire wagon
Is actually not the only horse-drawn Main Street vehicle to have disappeared over the years.
in addition to the many motorized Main Street vehicles you still see running around in the park today.
Back in the original Disneyland,
You would have also seen these unusual vehicles, the original horse-drawn Disneyland Surrey.
no, not like Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes' daughter, Surrey.
An old-timey horse-drawn wagon that once again you would have had to purchase an A ticket for.
Worth one shiny dime back then.
These wagons were everywhere in the early years of the park,
With the little miniature cars driving up and down Main Street,
including two smaller cars that you don't often see on Main Street these days,
along with the fire truck and eventually the giant double-decker buses.
and the horse-drawn fire wagon.
Main Street was one heck of a busy place.
And over the years, as the park got bigger and bigger and the crowds got bigger and bigger,
I guess all those vehicles just got to be a little too much.
and one by one, the old horse-drawn fire wagon and the horse-drawn Surreys were retired.
Which not only freed up a lot more space on Main Street,
But also meant a lot less cleanup on Main Street as well. Oh yes, that's right, even way back then.
cast members were going above and beyond.
To keep Walt's Magic Kingdom squeaky clean.
Matter of fact, they still have to do similar cleanups to this very day.
Because of course, as we all know, there's one horse-drawn conveyance on Main Street that Disneyland has not retired.
Those good old-fashioned horse-drawn.
Disneyland street cars. Just look at them, a classic.
Those have never gone away.
Yeah, it just wouldn't be good horse sense. Oh, I love looking at those Main Street vehicles, but sadly it's getting a little later in the afternoon.
And the Main Street vehicles have all got to go backstage now.
To clear the decks out on Main Street itself. For the daily parade.
Or more accurately.
To make room for the people who are going to be waiting for the parade.
But even though Main Street's getting kind of filled up now.
Fear not, we're not quite done with Main Street history.
Now, we've talked about this nugget a few times before.
But this stately pair of buildings behind our friend Jimberly over here
Once, in fact,
housed the Disneyland Tobacco
a
Shop.
place that not only sold pipes, pipe tobacco, and cigarettes,
But even sold very rare Disneyland cigars.
in a Disneyland Cigars cigar box. Just a little single box, very sought after by cigar collectors, Jimberly, let me tell you.
I'd love to have one of those in my Disneyland collection.
Anyway, I thought I'd bring up the old fine tobacco shop, not only because Disneyland just banned smoking as of May 1st.
So it's kind of timely and topical and whatnot, but also because I have recently found
on a weird double exposed roll of film I didn't look closely at before.
some old footage of the original Disneyland Tobacco Shop, complete with our friend Jimberly in the foreground.
You just gonna let that kid walk all over you, buddy?
Look at that, it's kind of hard to see, it's a little bit cropped off, but you can see that fine tobacco sign up there.
And believe it or not, this is another thing that did not close, I believe,
Until 1990.
for 35 years. The reason that there was a cigar store Indian out in front of this building on Main Street
It's because this building was actually a cigar store.
and of course, after 35 years of Jimberly being out here,
He had become tradition, so even though the tobacco store is long gone, Jimbo remains.
of course, back then he had other names and nicknames which were not exactly politically correct. I didn't feel really comfortable saying, and I thought,
Why can't he just be a Jim?
and since I've called every Jim I've ever known Jimberly at least once or twice,
He became Jimberly, thanks largely to all of you guys.
just let his name be Jim.
Right, Jimberly? All right, and now that we have talked about the old school tobacco shop, we'd better move on to the mystery that I am here for. Last but not least, huh?
And the mystery that I want to talk about is the cops.
Oh, that's right. You heard me. The 5-0, the fuzz.
The law.
Now, haven't you ever wondered why it is that Disneyland has its own fire department and its own fire station?
But no Disneyland Police Department? No Disneyland Police Station?
I used to think about that all the time until one day I found out
While looking through old school photos that Disneyland at one time did indeed
have its very own police department. And just like the Disneyland Fire Department, it too
was located right out here in Town Square.
connected just like this building to City Hall.
And it's still here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm excited to inform you that right here to the left of City Hall
Is the building once themed
as the Disneyland Disneyland Police Department.
Now this is something exceedingly rare.
Even the deepest Google search will very rarely bring up anything about the old police department.
Photos are very few and far between, and you will almost never hear any Disneyland historian talking about it.
But at one time above this doorway, that little blue area read
Disneyland Police Department, and I have the proof.
Let us take a look way back to 1956.
It's a little dark, but look carefully.
And you can just make out the words Disneyland Police Department.
Pretty awesome, right? I mean, we've all walked by this building
About a zillion times. And almost none of us ever knew that this used to be the old Disneyland Police Station. It makes sense. In many small towns across America, you would often find the fire department, the police department, and of course, City Hall and the mayor's office.
all in one big municipal building like this.
As a matter of fact, oftentimes it'd be fire department, police department, county jail, county courthouse, city hall.
All wrapped up into one.
In fact, this center building, Disneyland City Hall itself,
Was loosely modeled on an actual old school county courthouse.
located in Fort Collins, Colorado.
The boyhood hometown of legendary Disney artist Harper Goff.
Originally, Walt Disney wanted Main Street, USA to be based off his memories of his childhood hometown.
Marceline, Missouri.
And so, of course, he sent his Disney artists out to Marceline to take a look at the town.
Unfortunately, by the 1950s, Marceline had changed quite a bit.
Most of its turn-of-the-century buildings that Walt had remembered had either been torn down or lost their fancy Victorian decoration over the years.
And to be honest with you, even though Walt Disney had remembered it as this fancy sort of upscale Victorian town,
Marceline was never all that big and wasn't quite as elaborate as Walt remembered. But
Harper Goff remembered growing up in Fort Collins, Colorado, which was quite a bit bigger than Marceline, and
totally bedazzled with turn-of-the-century flair.
so he gathered up a bunch of reference material, showed the boss,
Walt Disney approved.
and Main Street became arguably just as much of an homage to Fort Collins as it was to Marceline.
But anyway, back to the fuzz, the Disneyland Police Department.
Now, as far as I can tell, even though this was labeled as the Disneyland Police Department,
Indicated not only by the large sign up there, but also by having the word police painted on these two glass globes here.
I don't think there was ever anything police related inside, but here's the catch.
In this photo published by the LA Times for Disneyland's opening day, you can see uniformed police officers standing at the top of the stairs, apparently greeting guests to come inside.
Weird, largely because of this photo. A very few Disney historians
Will say they believe there was an actual police department presence here at Disneyland in this office.
meaning like local Anaheim PD in here.
But according to the memoirs of Disneyland's very first guided tour guide, Bob D'Arcy,
Ooh, fancy name.
this small building was being used as his office space to give guided tours even before the park opened.
And on into the first decades of Disneyland's operation.
Now, as a matter of fact, in the very few and very rare photos of the Disneyland Police Department,
While it still had that name on the sign, the doors here
were always, and I mean always, closed. I have never ever seen a picture
of these doors open the way the fire department doors were.
this, coupled with the fact that later on that sign was replaced with a sign saying Disneyland Guided Tours,
Makes me kind of believe old Bobby's book.
and makes me think there probably wasn't ever actually any sort of police display in this building for guests.
But like I said, rumors persist from very early guests and some old school Disney historians who swear they remember
Either police displays or a security office or even possibly an Anaheim PD presence in this building.
And that's where the mystery comes in, is this is impossible to confirm. It is very hard to get photos even of the outside of this building when it was the police department.
And in all these years, I have never found a photo of the inside of the police department from back in the 1950s.
So the mystery stands. Was there an actual police department presence inside of this building? Was it always just used for guided tours?
Was there a display of police bric-a-brac in here the way there is in the fire department?
Till we unearth some old pictures, we may never know.
Whoa, check out this photo from 1956. As I was standing here talking to you, I got an email from a good friend at Stack's Liberty Ranch. And check out this sign in front of the police station. lost children. Clearly, for at least a little while, the police station was used to handle children who got separated from their parents. But this is the only photo I have ever seen showing something like this. Even by 1959, there was a big sign in front of City Hall about lost parents, which is a much better way to word it. So clearly only a temporary thing, but still, it proves that the police station, at least for a little while, was used for some serious business. Ooh, forgotten Disneyland history and mystery.
All right, I may not have any more photos to shed light on the inside of the police department building,
but I do have a little bit more about the old Disneyland Police Department. Check out this old footage of a Disneyland Police Department officer walking the beat.
Oh, that's right. It's not Anaheim PD and it's not Disneyland Security.
What you're looking at in this film from the 1950s is a walk-around character, a Disneyland police officer.
First, you see him on the corner here, passing by the doorway of what was the Swift Market House,
which of course dropped the Swift sponsorship long ago and is today a Starbucks location. And he then continues walking past several storefronts on Main Street,
which are still here today, although a lot of the signage has changed.
That is incredible. Disneyland then and now, the police edition.
See, the fact that old school Main Street had police officers walking the beat,
keeping Main Street free of hoodlums and street views, makes me wonder,
why wouldn't they have somehow incorporated that little police force,
at least in some sort of imaginary way, into the police department building?
You see, this stuff drives me crazy, makes me stay up all night thinking about it.
Well, I guess the answer is, for now, we just don't know.
You're a good cop, Giuseppe. They put one of yours in the hospital, you put one of theirs in the morgue. You're cold? Stamp your feet. Gotta learn something all those years walking the beat in the mud and the rain.
You know what's interesting is that in all those old pictures, you can see the facade has remained more or less untouched. And even though the glass has been replaced, and definitely this old school lamppost was recast in fiberglass so it wouldn't rust away,
it's still pretty much a perfect replica.
Everything is ship-shape. The only real difference I see is when you look at the base of the stairs in that Los Angeles Times photo. Very much still the same concrete block pattern, only it doesn't have this capstone on the top.
Oh, busted. Are you a later edition? You are.
And you know what else? When I found this photo online, I cannot even remember where now.
Someone in one of the comments pointed out that right down here below the light pole,
out of view of the public, is a bag that looks an awful lot like the kind of liquor store bag
that would have some booze in it.
Uh-oh, maybe that's why there's no more police department here. Someone got caught drinking on the job.
Maybe we should be the police, because we busted them.
Oh yeah, old school Disneyland Police Department.
Yeah.
The mystery of the Disneyland Police Department remains.
Do you have any old photos, film, or old school memories of the inside of the police department here at Disneyland? You could submit an anonymous tip
by visiting us at the website randomland.com. Get in touch.
You can find out where to donate rolls of old film. You can check out the social media, all kinds of other links and merchandise, sick merch, and etc., etc., etc.
But for the moment, just by watching this video here,
you've done your duty, officers.
And now that you're done walking the beat,
you can go home and sleep well.
show! Alright, and now for all the other stuff.
Yes, I know.
Ever since they moved the guided tour office to this little guided tour gardens area over here, they have mainly used this building
as a place to do in-depth guest surveys. You go inside, there's some computers in there. I think they're still in there, actually, as a matter of fact, although I haven't seen people use them lately.
Do a little survey, presto changeo, done. And yes, of course, the #1 secret of the firehouse is that Walt Disney's personal private apartment was and is on top. There are many stories, myths, and legends about it, as well as about the fire pole underneath the that some say used to lead up there.
But I didn't mention it because we've already filmed that in some other videos.
But yes, it's up there, and yes, I'm aware.
See, most of you fine folks know that I know. And I know that you know that I know that you know that I know.
But if I forget to mention something like that...
Well, the YouTube comment section will be dirtier than that stuff that guy was cleaning up in the 50s off the ground, you know what I'm saying?
Those crazy comments.
All I can think of now is the room. Put your stupid comments in your pocket. That's the best line.
All right, we got bandages to change and food to buy at home.
Allie has been recovering slowly, but very nicely. Thank you for asking.
Matter of fact, she is feeling so much better. I believe she's going to be on this next upcoming edition of the Notcast.
Our Patreon exclusive, not quite a podcast, but not a podcast, which is why it's a Notcast.
So hopefully we'll see you over there real soon.
As for me, my friends,
Even though I must admit,
things are looking much, much nicer out here.
I gotta tell you, for some reason,
I'm really starting to crave an uncovered castle.
where can I find one of those? I'll have to think about it for a while.
All right, fire. You know what people are thinking about when they see this statue? You know what this statue reminds me of? It reminds me of oranges. I remember when it was all farmland as far as the eye could see. Old man Disney owned all of this. Had this crazy idea about breeding mice and popcorn. And I believe, if I recollect correctly, it worked. And now there's mice and popcorn everywhere. See? Popcorn, oh no! Get away from the popcorn!